The story begins, a merchant is driving alone in the forest, and some goblins notice him from afar. They jump at him since he is easy prey to them, and the merchant is also very scared. The merchant screams for help, asking if anyone can help him. Fortunately, luck is on his side, and some group of warriors are approaching. The warriors slay the first goblin on his truck, and they ask him to go on while they kill the other goblins around. That group completely kills all the goblins in the forest, and they return to the city. On the other hand, guarding the city gate is Fate. Fate is a weak, poor boy with a unique skill called Gluttony, which only makes him hungry, and his all stats are level 1. His stomach makes hunger noises. Then, he hears the warriors talking about how they killed goblins that day and how they have managed to level up a little. He is envious of them but is grateful that he at least has a job. The other group of adventurers is trying to get better weapons until the announcement that the Holy Knights are coming. The trio is popularly called the trio of the Vlerick siblings. While the trio walks past, an orange rolls over to the knight's boot. The merchant apologizes to the Holy Knights and begs for their mercy. The man tries to hold their leg, and Hado gets very furious and kicks the man away, telling him what audacity is. Then, Memel jumps into the conversation. She threatens to kill the merchant, but the leader of the trio tells the other two to stop. Before leaving, he tells the merchant not to let the same thing happen again. The trio walks away, calling the old man lucky. The group of adventurers was watching everything, finding it hard to believe that Lady Roxy is a holy knight, like them. Then we see Fate, who is standing beside the gate. The trio arrives and asks if Fate did a proper job today. Fate lowers his head and confirms that he did. The leader of the trio then drops a few coins on the floor as payment and tells Fate to pick it up. Fate slowly starts picking up the coins. Yet, one of the holy knights steps on his hand. He starts insulting Fate, saying that he is so filthy that he didn't notice him. As you expect, Fate is a bullied person who has no way to fight back. His stomach makes noise again, making the leader of the trio mad. He claims that this noise makes it seem like they don't feed him. They ask if Fate is trying to embarrass them and kick him away. Start humiliating and punishing him for that. In his mind, Fate explains that in this world, everyone's worth depends on the special power they got from gods, they call them skills. Then, Roxy arrives and tells them to stop. She reminds them that their duties as holy knights are to protect the people and that bullying a villager isn't a good habit. Annoyed by her presence, they walk away. Roxy walks toward Fate and asks if he's okay while trying to get him up. She uses her handkerchief to clean up his injuries, but Fate notices the way the trio's leader is looking at Roxy. She finishes cleaning him up, and for that, he thanks her. Roxy replies that she's only doing what a holy knight should do. She then says that his shift is over and hers will begin. Fate gives her the pole, and Roxy tells him to tell her if the trio continues to do the same by bullying him. Later at night, Fate is in the bar thinking about Roxy's words. But Fate knows that the trio might take revenge on her, so he decides not to involve her in this thing. Then the barkeep notices the injury on his face and instantly figures out how he got it. He prays that Fate does not end up like the previous person because the previous person died miserably. Fate appreciates his words, even if they weren't kind words, and pays for his meal. As Fate walks on the streets, his stomach is making noise again. Turns out his skill allows him to be always hungry. He calls that skill stupid and wishes he could have been born with something more useful so he could become a holy knight. Suddenly, Fate stops and notices some thieves climbing up the walls. He starts running back to Roxy to report the situation. Immediately, Roxy gives him the pole and says she will apprehend the thieves. Then she heads inside the gate. In split seconds, Fate hears the sounds of swords and the screams of the thieves. Roxy has killed most of them, but one of the thieves successfully escapes. Seeing this, Fate starts to run away, but he stops after remembering that Roxy trusted him with this. He decides to confront the thief head-on. He decides that since the thief is injured, it can stop him. Instead, he stabs the thief with the flagpole in his hand, and the man dies. Suddenly, he hears a sound from his status board that his gluttony skill has been activated, and he has gained 2 skills, Identify and Telepathy. As Fate begins to wonder what just happened and how he activated a sudden skill, his stats are being updated. When he checks them, he sees that every single one is over 100. He also gained 2 new skills, Identify and Telepathy. He's still confused that his skill activated and drops the pole. He doesn't understand what just happened. Roxy then comes running toward him to check if he got hurt by the thief. She notices that he doesn't look well and is worried. She never said that, but Fate managed to hear her thoughts as if he has suddenly gotten the ability to read minds. Her thoughts. He claims he isn't hurt and hears her thoughts again when she expresses relief. She then says that she will have to report the situation to her superiors. Fate tells her to take the credit all to herself because the trio would cause problems for him. Roxy gets concerned again, so they both realize that it would be best for Roxy to take the claim for killing the assassin. She decides to give him something in exchange and invites him to work for the Hart family. Of course, her being a member of the Hart family would mean that this loner boy would get a perfect chance to get even closer to her. Still, he remains hesitant to do so, which gets after Roxy asking over and over. He agrees to work for her. He heads back home and is still confused by his status changes. He doesn't know what his new skills are but thinks that telepathy is what allowed him to hear Roxy's thoughts. He then starts to worry about his gluttony skill activation and begins to see glimpses of the status menu, which shows that his stats are in the triple digits now. He wonders what is causing him to gain such stats for no apparent reason and for now remains grateful for that happening to him. The next day, Fate goes to the market and starts looking for a weapon. However, he only has 2 silver coins. The merchant suggests that if he wants, he can have the trash weapons inside the barrel. He decides to check the blades and uses his identify skill to check every single blade. Everything is pretty trash until he grabs a black sword that is just like him, untreated and neglected. Out of nowhere, the sword itself begins to speak with Fate through his telepathy skill and tells him that his name is Greed, and it calls Fate Gluttony. The sword tells if he buys him, promise that he will make him stronger. The sword explains they have a lot in common. Fate then makes his decision and buys the sword. Meanwhile, the trio was discussing about Roxy as Roxy's family and they're a part of the Great Five families who supports the kingdom. On the other hand, Fate goes to the outskirts of the city with his new sword. The sword keeps repeating his name just because it wants to memorize it. The sword then says that enemies come, and Fate starts to panic. The goblin jumps on him, but Fate's eyes change, and he slices the goblin in one slash. The other voice speaks again, explaining that gluttony was activated and will increase his stats. He also gained the strength boost skill. Fate is confused that this happened again, but there are more goblins around. Greed starts laughing and explains that goblins always appear in groups. They all attack Fate, but he manages to kill them one after another. His gluttony skill keeps activating every time he defeats a goblin. A few hours later, Fate finally manages to defeat hundreds of goblins. He now has a few more skills, but his stats are leveled up, and strength is in triple digits. Then Greed asks if Fate stopped being hungry. Fate is initially confused, but he realizes that his stomach never made noise today. The sword mentions how dangerous Fate's gluttony is, so it's better for him to hide his skills from the public. Fate asks how Greed knows about it, and the sword explains they're the same being. Confused, Fate notices the adventurers group coming. Greed tells him that he shouldn't let people know about his gluttony skill because it defies the divine law. Fate realizes that he cannot party up, he must always fight alone. Greed then tells him that he's not alone because Greed is with him. Fate accepts those words and decides to return, yet Greed stops him from returning without collecting the goblin's ears so he can trade with the Adventurers Guild in exchange for some good cash. Now, Fate starts regretting killing so many goblins, but he manages to earn 3 silver and 80 bronze coins and decides to get some meat for dinner. Greed stops him, telling him to do maintenance on him first. First, Fate suddenly bumps into a shady guy coming from a dark alley. There's a little girl with a suspicious guy. She touches Fate, and he hears her voice begging for his help. He sees her eyes shaking in fear, and the guy starts pulling the girl while walking away. Fate then uses his skill to identify the suspicious guy's skills. However, Greed explains the guy has a conceal ability which hides everything from identify. Greed asks what Fate will do, and he reveals that he will save the girl. The girl ends up in a warehouse, chained against the wall. The guy starts mocking her, telling her that she will become a toy for the Holy Knights. Fate watches and decides to help her, but Greed explains that the guy is stronger than him and that he should turn away. But Fate wants to help her, at any cost. Here the first episode ends. If you like this video then subscribe to the channel. Till then, peace out.